Having previously made episodes on northern New Jersey and central New Jersey, I'm continuing this state parks history series with southern New Jersey, which mostly covers the historic area code 609. The state park system of New Jersey was authorized in 1923 when the state legislature created the State Park Service, starting with Washington Crossing State Park. And the first park opened in 1926. So let's begin. Before I go into the southern New Jersey, there was one park in central Jersey that I forgot to mention in my previous slideshow, and that's Pigeon Swamp State Park, which is 1,078 acres and opened in 1978 in South Brunswick. It's named for colonial period landowner Ann Pigeon, who owned this just before independence. In 1780, the state dug the Great Ditch through this land to dredge the swamps here to make way for farmland. So there are traces of the Great Ditch as a small canal that runs through this state park. Then in 1945, the Dallenbach Sand Company dredged part of this site for its sand mining operation, and their former sand pit is now a swamp and a pond within the park. It is a habitat for several rare and endangered species, including the barred owl and the bog turtle. This state park property was saved from development as nearby farms became warehouses, cemeteries, and suburban subdivisions. So in an area where you might see cemeteries, logistics warehouses, residential housing, there is the Pigeon Swamp State Park, where you can walk through its trails. But you can see even within the state park, there are private properties that avoided becoming part of the park. Now into southern Jersey we go. The Indian King Tavern State Historic Site is located in Haddonfield. This is a building completed in 1750, named in honor of the Lenape natives who had peaceful relations with the colonists, but over the generations were gradually pushed to the west. The first two owners were loyalists, and they fled from Haddonfield as the revolution broke out. The third owner was a Quaker pacifist who was arrested by the Patriots for not supporting or participating in the revolution. In 1777, the New Jersey State Seal was designed at the Indian King Tavern, and the Council of Safety met here to lead the local revolutionary efforts. As this tavern is located on a road known as the King's Highway, it was here that the Patriot generals Anthony Wayne, the Marquis de Lafayette, and the Polish Count Casimir Pulaski were all believed to have visited and likely ate at this tavern. It was acquired by the state in 1903 to be forever preserved as a local piece of the American Revolution. On the wall of the tavern, you have a sign that reminds people of its colonial and revolutionary history. There's reenactors in costumes inside and period displays. This tavern appears in the book Revolutionary New Jersey by Robert A. Mayers. Next building that is also a state historic site is the Walt Whitman State Historic Site. Built around 1848, Walt Whitman, the famous poet and writer, purchased this home in 1884, living here until his death in 1892. Here he received famous visitors. Whitman's heirs sold it to the city of Camden in 1921. It was opened to the public 5 years later as a museum. In 1947, ownership of the Walt Whitman State Historic Site passed to the state of New Jersey. Not to be confused, the Walt Whitman State Historic Site in Huntington, New York, which is where the famous poet was born. So there's a little bit of Walt Whitman in New York and in New Jersey. Tall Pines State Preserve is 111 acres in Gloucester County that was acquired by the state in 2016. It is a former golf course that was developed in the 1950s and was the first golf course to have night golfing. In 1984, Ron Yavorsky, a former Eagles quarterback, bought this golf course and ran it as the Eagles Nest Golf Course until it was closed in 2006. As it was abandoned, nature reclaimed the site, and local residents fought to preserve it from being developed under the campaign called Save Maple Ridge. Could have been the home of 123 houses, but instead remains preserved by nature in Gloucester County. This park is largely the result of the Gloucester County Nature Club and the Friends of Tall Pines State Preserve, the successor to the Save Maple Ridge campaign. Brancocas State Park is 1,252 acres, acquired by the state in 1965. A nature center within this park was built in 1977. The earliest Europeans named the creek from Brancocas, a native king who occupied the surrounding lands. In the 1890s, there was an attempt to develop a subdivision here. Grading efforts in September 1894 uncovered two native skeletons buried here long ago. The Hainesport Mining and Transportation Company was formed here in 1901 for gravel and sand mining that was ended by 1913 as nature then reclaimed the site on Rancocas Creek, a tributary of the Delaware River. So today you could hike and walk among the nature here in Rancocas State Park. Brandon T. Byrne State Forest is 37,242 acres acquired by the state in 1908. Originally was known as the Lebanon State Forest. It was renamed for Byrne in 2004 on the 25th anniversary of the Pinelands Protection Act. Brandon T. Byrne was a Democratic governor in office from 1974 to 1982. During his administration, the Pinelands were designated as a nature preserve, and also gambling was legalized in Atlantic City in an attempt to make that seashore city into the Las Vegas of the East. And this was under the Pinelands Preservation Act that sizable tracts of land from Ocean County down to Cape May County were designated for preservation from development in a similar move comparable to the Catskill Preserve and the Adirondack Park in New York, where people do live within the borders of the Pinelands Preserve, but under limits to development, with lots of land here designated by state and federal agencies for nature preservation within the Brandon T. Byrne State Forest is just one example of the parks within the New Jersey Pinelands. Brandon T. Byrne, as I mentioned, a very well-known governor whose name used to appear on the Brandon T. Byrne Arena at the Meadowlands, which has since been given corporate names since the early 2000s. And Atlantic City is also, even though there was an attempt to make it Las Vegas of the East, the city has declined largely from competition from online and Native American gambling. But again, very well-known name, governor during the Carter administration, whose name now remains on the Brandon T. Byrne State Forest. Within the state forest, there's the David Moore Monument, dedicated to the founder of the State Natural Area System, and also the Widesbog Village Historic District, run by the nonprofit Widesbog Preservation Trust. At 3,000 acres, the largest New Jersey cranberry farm was here at this village in the early 1900s. This was a company town where the cranberry workers lived and had their one-room schoolhouse here until 1918, after which the students would take the bus to a much bigger school nearby. Advances in harvesting techniques led to a reduced need for workers, and the village declined. 1967, the village and the nearby fields were sold to the state to be managed as a state historic site. The Darlington family still farms the much smaller cranberry bogs within this state park and its historic village. Not far from the Byrne State Forest is the Dr. James Still State Historic Site, one of the smaller state historic sites and one of the newer ones. Dr. James Still, who lived from 1812 to 1882, was a renowned herbalist and homeopathic healer, often known as the Black Doctor of the Pines. Born at Indian Mills and lived here in Burlington County for most of his life. Born to former slaves, Levin and Charity Still. His brothers included the abolitionist William Still, a founder of the Underground Railroad, and Peter Still, who rescued himself from slavery or among his brothers. Still's residence stood adjacent to his medical office, but the house was demolished in 1932. The office itself became a small residential shack and was put up for sale in the early 21st century. The descendants of Dr. James Still found out about the sale and brought it to the attention of the state, which then purchased it through the Green Acres program in 2006, restoring the house to its 19th century condition as the medical office of Dr. James Still. So a countryside Black history figure here in southern New Jersey. And there's a map here of the Underground Railroad, which ran through the property on its way north as a path for runaway slaves. A safe house. You can see behind the house, there's a sizable property there that is a forest, which could be turned into trails. And so a lot of what's going on with the Dr. James Still State Historic Site is still under redevelopment, as well as the neighboring Bunning property, which was acquired by the state to create a much larger park. Double Trouble State Park, there's an interesting name. 8,495 acres acquired by the state in 1964. This area was referred to as Double Trouble on property deeds as early as 1890, likely relating to the dams that were bursting on this site. The former Double Trouble Cranberry Farm, which began operations here in 1863. Edward Crabb and James Porter purchased the property in 1903, establishing the Double Trouble Lumber Company. And a few years later, the Crabb family created the Double Trouble Company to focus more on fruit production. A modern cranberry sorting and packing house, and cottages for migrant workers to stay here during the harvest seasons. Another company town where cranberries were harvested. Edward Crabb died in 1953, and then the Garden State Parkway, which runs along the eastern border of the park. That parkway also compromised the farming operations. The American Cranberry Exchange dissolved in 1957. Profits then declined. The company dissolved, and the tract was sold to the state in 1964 to become a state park. This is Double Trouble near the Garden State Parkway. And there's still a cranberry bog within the state park, so you can see how it was done, as well as historical displays with labels that appeared on New Jersey cranberries. So today we often think of Cape Cod as America's cranberry capital, but there was a time when New Jersey also offered good competition to Cape Cod. Cranberry production at Double Trouble continued through 2010. And today, cranberries made in New Jersey largely are based in Burlington County. This is a Double Trouble State Park. And within the state park, there's historical signs that speak of the company town in the Double Trouble Village, as well as maps of the larger pine barrens, the New Jersey pine lands, which Double Trouble State Park is located within. In the next video, I will continue to speak about southern New Jersey by including the state parks along the ocean coast, along Delaware Bay and Delaware River, more state forests, and Cape May, the southern tip of the state. Some of the flags you see here that represent southern New Jersey include the township of Cherry Hill, sizable suburb to Philadelphia, the flag of Atlantic City, Vinland, or is it Vineland? What's the correct pronunciation? You could leave that in the comments. And the capital of Trenton and Cape May County can all be seen here. I want to thank you again very much for watching this video and look forward to your comments. Thank you so much.